So 2023 is almost here, so I thought I would take this opportunity to again reflect on another year of unfettered, unregulated capitalism. And I'm sure some of you at home are thinking, well, okay, pump the brakes there. I mean, we have elements of capitalism, but we also have all of these regulations, these regulatory agencies on the federal and state level, all of these taxes and wealth redistribution schemes. And yeah, we might have some still have some semblance of a free market, but it's definitely not unfettered and unregulated. And I guess people like Nina Turner would beg to differ. For those who don't know Nina Turner, she's an educator, an activist, and a senior fellow at Race Power Policy, has over 500,000 followers on Twitter. I guess she's part of the Young Turks network. She unsuccessfully ran for Congress from the great state of Ohio. Thankfully, she got defeated, but earlier this year, Nina Turner said Elon Musk is a prime example of why unfettered capitalism is a danger to this country and the planet as a whole.
Blow it out your ass.
Of course, she has a whole thread. I didn't bring this up to react to the whole thread, but clearly people are still under this wild assumption that we have unfettered, unregulated capitalism, or as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calls it.
Right now, when we have this no-holds-barred, Wild West hyper-capitalism.
Blow it out your ass.
Anyway, I think the biggest story this year in the realm of economics was inflation. I find this amusing because in 2021, many of the cheerleaders of President jibber-jabbering Joe Biden's crazy spending spree, many of his cheerleaders were telling us, don't worry about inflation. We're not going to get any inflation. As Robert Reich put it, it's just a boogeyman put out by conservatives and corporations to scare you away from his wonderful economic planning policies. Anyway, when inflation became noticeable to a lot of American consumers, many of these same dopes and disingenuous hacks, many of them blamed it on corporate greed.
You absolutely suck!
Because as we all know, before inflation, corporations, they were never greedy. Or maybe they were just less greedy before inflation. Who knows? Now, there were some more honest commentators like John Oliver. I remember he had this take saying something like, yeah, some of the government spending, that it probably did cause some of the inflation that we're seeing, but doing nothing would have been a lot worse than inflation. And I guess those were the only two options in 2021, were doing nothing or adding trillions of new dollars to the economy. Because I guess liberating the economy, deregulating, lifting restrictions on trade, I guess that was out of the question. Of course, after inflation became, again, noticeable by American consumers, Congress and the Biden administration, they decided to act. And of course, they were not going to do stuff like liberate the economy, lift restrictions on trade, deregulate, lift taxes. No. What they did was pass the Inflation Reduction Act, or as I like to call it, the Wallets Reduction Act. Even Chris Cuomo at CNN, who is not exactly Milton Friedman, I remember watching one of his segments and him saying that it's pretty disingenuous to call this the Inflation Reduction Act, especially considering that a lot of it focuses on climate. But what the Inflation Reduction Act did do was add new taxes, new regulations, and new special favors for special interests. And here's a summary page put out by the Senate Democrats, which I found interesting. So again, American consumers, American consumers, they're stressing out about their grocery tabs. They're stressing out about higher gasoline prices and higher housing costs and other rising costs. And as you can see here, the government was basically like, how about you spend $30,000+ on a brand new electric vehicle so that you can save roughly $7,500 on your taxes? Are you tired of paying out the ass in gasoline? Are you tired of paying higher prices at the gas pump? Well, we're not going to lift restrictions. We're not going to lift costly restrictions and costly taxes on fossil fuels. No, 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 no. What we expect you to do is to obligate yourself to a high monthly car payment so that you can charge your car at home as opposed to going to the gas pump. We want you to charge your car at home with electricity that, let's face it, is probably also generated from fossil fuel energy. Also, if you happen to live in the great state of California, sometimes your government will ask you to not charge your car if it gets a little too hot and the grid becomes a little too vulnerable.
Oh, you absolutely suck!
This is actually something I appreciate about the whole contempt for Elon Musk that we're seeing from the so-called left. You know, the left is hating a lot on Elon Musk as of late, and I'm over here thinking, you guys, you asshats, are a major reason why Elon Musk is probably richer than he otherwise would be with all of the favors that companies like Tesla and SolarCity have enjoyed over the years in effort to save the world from climate change. Way to go, you guys. You know, through things like electric vehicle subsidies and solar panel subsidies and cap and trade programs. Nice work, you guys. Although it looks like these new subsidies by the Inflation Reduction Act, at least according to President Biden, it looks like a lot of these new subsidies are only going to go to electric vehicle manufacturers that employ unions and organized labor. I guess that's what 97% or whatever of scientists agree on, that saving the planet from climate change requires giving kickbacks and favors to unions and special interest groups. How convenient. Going back to the summary page, maybe the tabs at the grocery store would be lower if, once we give American farmers about $20 billion to employ climate-smart agricultural practices. You know, that's why the price of ground beef went up over the last 2 years. It was because farmers were not being climate smart enough or whatever. This summary page also mentions that the post office, the postal service, will get $3 billion to spend on zero-emission vehicles. How will this investment bring the price of a hot dog or the price of a cheeseburger back down? Who the hell knows? I guess we're going to have to wait and find out. The Inflation Reduction Act was also applauded for the new price controls on prescription pharmaceutical drugs. You know, it's amazing. The federal government has tried to make prescription medication more affordable for over a half century at this point through programs like Medicare, Medicaid, expansions and reforms of Medicare and Medicaid, expansions in the FDA, and the so-called Affordable Care Act, yet drug prices are still a big fucking problem, but I guess they'll get it right this time. And according to this piece on the Wall Street Journal written in November of this year by Joe Grogan, I guess the Inflation Reduction Act is already having an impact. It's slowing down innovation in pharmaceuticals. Way to go, guys. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation and the Congressional Budget Office, they anticipate that the price controls might cause launch prices on new drugs to be higher than they otherwise would be. Again, Way to go, you guys. I'm sure there will be a lot of undesired consequences of these price controls, as there always are. And I guess when we have to suffer through them, I'm sure everyone will blame it on unfettered, unregulated capitalism. Another aspect of the Inflation Reduction Act is new taxes on corporations, like I guess a 15% minimum tax on corporations that make over $1 billion a year on profits, as if these corporations won't just pass these new taxes on to the consumers, which would mean that it would have the opposite effect of the desired goal. Think about it. How would getting more of your income siphoned by the government, how would that motivate you to lower your prices?
Really makes you think.
I've been thinking about this a lot because in California, they're talking about imposing a windfall profits tax on oil companies. So presumably, they will start taxing you at a higher rate once you reach a certain amount of profits for the year. And again, why would you then decide to lower prices after more of your money is already getting taken?
That's just not smart.
Then, as you can see, there's also a 1% tax on stock buybacks. You know, that's why the price of your morning coffee has gone up over the last 2 years. I guess it's because government was not taxing stock buybacks enough. Both of these taxes will probably inflate the cost of saving and investing, thereby discouraging saving and investing. And if all of this results in less investment in companies, or perhaps results in lighter retirement accounts, I'm sure they'll all blame it on unfettered, unregulated capitalism. Another big piece of legislation that the Biden administration and Congress passed in 2022 was the CHIPS Act, which I guess gives tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies to some of these large tech companies. And I actually found myself in agreement with Bolshevik Bernie Sanders on this issue. He wrote on his website about this, calling it what it really is, which is corporate welfare.
You're goddamn right.
You know, pointing out that a lot of these companies, they're wildly profitable, and if that's the case, why do these companies need corporate welfare? And even a couple weeks ago, Joe Biden was bragging that these companies were, at least according to his tweet, were spending a combined $180 billion on manufacturing in the United States, which, fine, wonderful. I think this is all great, but I can't help but wonder, if they're investing their own money, then why the hell do they need taxpayer subsidies? And going back to the Inflation Reduction Act, I can't help but think maybe these tech companies might have more money to invest in manufacturing if they were not getting new taxes imposed on them. I mean, seriously, does this goofball we call a president, does he think any of this shit through? I'm going to guess oftentimes the answer is
Yeah, to the no, yeah, to the no, to the no, no, no.
the Biden administration also relieved or tried to relieve hundreds of billions of dollars in student loan debt via executive order, which is bouncing around the courts. Many think that this executive order will not stand, it will not survive. I thought this whole ordeal really brought to the forefront how pernicious government assistance becomes, because the White House was taking to Twitter in response to criticisms and detractors, demonizing people who criticized the executive order by calling out everyone who took PPP loan money and had their debts relieved, which is disingenuous for a variety of reasons. PPP was passed by Congress, whereas the student loan relief was not. And my understanding of PPP is that the forgiveness was sort of baked in and expected with the program, unlike with student loans. But the fact that this was used as some sort of gotcha by the sitting president, I think is pretty shitty. You know, I thought this was supposed to be an appealing part of Joe Biden because the last president was all about trying to govern via executive order and then taking to Twitter to feud with his detractors and his critics. And now we have the Biden administration doing the same fucking thing. Well done, you guys.
Well done.
On top of that, I think this ordeal should probably get people rethinking the government's role in providing and securing student loans, which is a major, if not the major reason why tuition prices in America are through the fucking roof. Keep this in mind next time some socialist asshat tries to blame high tuition prices on unfettered, unregulated capitalism. Speaking of education, we saw public school teachers unions trying to keep schools closed this year. We saw this with the Chicago public school teachers unions. And I keep seeing articles, by the way, with Chicago, it was reported this year that they have a $9.5 billion budget for, I think, the upcoming school year, which I guess they reportedly have 341,000 students, which translates to roughly $27,000 to $28,000 per student per year in education in Chicago public schools. I think Chicago residents should probably think about this and think about what kind of return they're getting on their investments. Either way, we've also seen articles and studies that say that the lockdowns have had a devastating impact on learning in America's schools. I think something like 92% of American students are educated in public schools, and I'm sure they'll still try to blame the lackluster learning results on unfettered, unregulated capitalism. There was also a big fuss over Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and his education reforms. And part of me can't help but just say, yeah, guys, this is a notable flaw with getting the states entrenched in education. One of the consequences is that the classroom becomes an endless political battle, and sometimes someone you do not like will get control over how the classroom operates. Just one more reason to privatize education, but many will lead you to believe that we essentially have unfettered, unregulated capitalism in the classroom already. We also saw the Biden administration put sanctions on Russian oil after Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, which I'm not necessarily opposed to this move, but I think what these sanctions exposed was how insane the anti-fossil fuel policies in America and Europe have been, and the various trade restrictions, and how these have been destructive to American life. A major reason why refineries have been importing oil from places like Russia is because of protectionist policies like the Jones Act that make it fucking costly to transport oil between the states by using ships. So refineries have resorted to importing oil from other countries. Just another case where protectionist policies end up having the opposite effect of their desired goal. Another alternative would be building pipelines, which, as we know, Joe Biden and the Democratic Party have long opposed. Meanwhile, the Joe Biden administration has been canceling new oil drilling projects and leases, according to CBS News and the Wall Street Journal. I think this is a good time to maybe rethink whether or not we want the federal government to control 600 plus million acres of land, because one of the consequences is that it forces companies to grovel and beg the federal government, beg bureaucrats, beg the sitting president for permission to extract resources like oil and gas. And everyone just accepts this madness. But then they'll get bent out of shape over Bill Gates buying some farmland. The point is that these sanctions on Russian oil probably would not hurt or sting nearly as much if America had freer markets. But we have the Bidens and the Gavin Newsoms of the world trying to blame the higher gasoline prices on corporate greed. Which you could argue is just blaming capitalism by proxy. And again, as if oil companies were not greedy until a few years ago. Whatever it is, the high gas prices cannot be blamed on the brilliant economic planning of Democrats, apparently. I guess federal regulators are also stalling nuclear power plant renewals in places like Florida, demanding that they provide environmental impact reports or whatever. Then we have more from the FDA. We still have the Food and Drug Administration in the unfettered, unregulated capitalist paradise of America. I guess they decided to outlaw Juul e-cigarettes this year. The FDA is doing this because what about the children? What about the children? Will someone please think of the children? Got to keep these e-cigarettes out of the hands of teenagers. Meanwhile, when it comes to stuff like baby formula, which is used to, feed babies, then the FDA is essentially like, fuck the children. Yeah, you guys remember those baby formula shortages we saw this year? I remember people like Sam Cedar were trying to blame it on capitalism. It turns out that the formula shortages were due largely to FDA regulations and protectionist tariffs on behalf of the dairy industry.
Oh, you absolutely suck!
Now, you got to wonder why the Biden administration and Congress did not think to lift tariffs and trade restrictions with their Inflation Reduction Act. But going back to tobacco bans, I guess California voters voted to keep flavored vapes illegal in the state of California. They also voted to keep sports gambling illegal because, again, what about the children? Recall last year when I did this segment, I mentioned how the California government was reportedly spending $100 million to rescue the struggling cannabis industry, who is struggling because of costly taxes and regulations.
No surprise there.
So the California government will spend hundreds of millions to prop up the cannabis industry because of their own economic planning, but sports betting, cotton candied flavored vapes, hey man, what about the children? Also in 2022, we got to see Congress impose a new labor contract on the railroad industry because of a century-old regulation called the Railway Labor Act. I did a whole video on that topic recently. Meanwhile, in California, goofy-ass Gavin Newsom passed a law that essentially applies the standards of the Railway Labor Act to the fast food industry in California by creating a new government bureau that negotiates and regulates wages and working conditions between fast food employees and fast food companies. Also did a whole video on that topic. Meanwhile, in California, we found out that it's going to cost roughly $1.7 million for the city of San Francisco to build a 150 square foot public park bathroom.
Oh, you absolutely suck!
Why does it cost so much to build a 100 square foot public bathroom in a park in San Francisco? I'm sure someone will say it's unfettered, unregulated capitalism's fault. Meanwhile, in California, according to the New York Times, they did a story about how California's bullet train went off the rails. And according to this story, I guess in 2008, when this railway project, this high-speed rail was proposed, they were promising that Californians that by 2020, that residents would be enjoying high-speed rail from San Francisco to Los Angeles for the small price tag of $33 billion. And according to the New York Times, not only is this project still far from complete,
No surprise there.
but now the estimated cost has ballooned to over $100 billion. Meanwhile, in the great state of California, I guess state regulators are stopping the construction of new desalination plants, some of which might provide 50 million gallons of consumable drinking water per day in California. This is, again, California, which is a state that's known for droughts, and as we know, it's a state that is known for unfettered, unregulated capitalism. We're also seeing reports this year about federal agencies like the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigations policing misinformation on social media.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Yeah, nothing ominous about this kind of behavior. The Biden administration is also reportedly working with the Department of Labor. They're considering reclassifying millions of private contractors as employees. Who knew this was possible under unfettered, unregulated capitalism? And then I also saw this year that the FAA, I guess the FAA makes companies like SpaceX jump through a bunch of hoops in order to get their launch licenses. I guess if you want to launch probes and rockets and satellites into outer space, you need a license from the federal government. And some of their requirements involve investing money in education and preservation efforts. And finally, under unfettered, unregulated capitalism, I guess we still have antitrust laws, those beloved antitrust laws where companies have to get permission from bureaucrats and politicians to acquire another business. Or maybe in some cases, politicians and bureaucrats will shake them down for the crime of being too big, too successful. We're seeing this with Elizabeth Warren and Kroger trying to buy Albertsons. I guess Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders were lobbying the Federal Trade Commission to ban the acquisition of Albertsons by Kroger. We're also seeing this with Microsoft's attempts to acquire Activision. I guess the FTC is seeking to block that acquisition. And regarding the recent controversy surrounding Southwest Airlines, I guess Senator Elizabeth Warren thinks the solution to this problem is preventing JetBlue from acquiring Spirit Airlines. How will that magically solve Southwest Airlines' problems as of late? Who the hell knows? Meanwhile, according to Scott Lincecum, he wrote a piece about this earlier this year for Cato Institute, where he talks about how a reason why we have a lack of competition in air travel in the United States is because of restrictions on foreign competition. Scott Lincecum has gone on to say that none of the world's top 20 airlines can legally offer domestic air service in the United States. Yeah, and I guess this is what populism is, you guys. It's a total clown show, folks. Total clown show. And you see this with their double standards on antitrust and protectionist policies. You know, when it comes to antitrust, they love to wield antitrust in the name of creating competition. But when it comes to protectionist policies, they want to protect Americans from competition. Just astonishing logic, folks.
That's just not smart.
Anyways, guys, have a happy new year, and hopefully in 2023 we will see a more unfettered, unregulated market than we did in 2022.